Thing I have to say is yes, I lived in Canada, I lived in Europe, now I live in Australia. But this video is only going to be partially based on the experience I had in those places because when I was living in each one of them, I had vastly different life circumstances. So I'm going to take a lot on some of my general knowledge as well, on the people that I've met, on what I've heard and what not I know, as well as on my personal experience. To show you how different the experiences were, I lived in England when I was a kid. I lived in Canada when I was a teenager, and then I lived in Europe at my early 20s, and now is when I'm living in Australia. I had never been in Australia before. So obviously, just the circumstances that I'm in each of those countries are vastly different. And of course, I can't really compare being a 10-year-old in England to being a 23-year-old in Australia. The thing I decided to compare are salaries, and they're really vastly different. I would probably rank Australia, then Canada, and then Europe in general, though obviously, since Europe is many different countries, some countries in Europe might be a little bit better. But out of the countries I lived in, I think the worst one for salaries was definitely Italy. France was a little bit better than Italy. The UK, I think, is a little bit better than France, and then Canada is a bit better than the UK, and Australia is a bit better than Canada. So if you can compare like the best, which is Australia, to the worst, which is Italy, it is like insane differences. I'm talking like you earn literally 3 times as much for the same job in Australia as you would in Italy, with maybe a little bit less taxes. So it's even more profound. Some other countries in Europe, which I have not lived in, but I know about, of course, like for example Germany, they do offer a little bit more competitive salaries. But like I was talking about in the previous video, I know a guy who is a physiotherapist in Germany. He's German, and he's now living in Melbourne, working as a barista and making more money as a barista in Melbourne than a physiotherapist in Germany. So it's clear that if Germany, which is even one of the better countries in Europe for salaries, is still not comparing to Australia, then definitely the worst, like Italy, like Portugal, like East Europe, uh, they don't even have a chance. So you want to move somewhere for salaries, definitely move to Australia. If you can move to Switzerland, maybe Switzerland would be worth it. I think the minimum wage in Geneva is like 25 francs an hour, which is nearing maybe 40 Australian dollars an hour, which is definitely a lot. But that is a very small part of a small country of Europe. So good luck finding a job there. With Australia is just huge, big market, lots of people comparatively. So yeah. Second thing is the weather. Canada is amazing in the summer. I was there exactly in the summer, so I was lucky about that. I was in Montreal, and Montreal is just such a fascinating, very good vibe city. I definitely liked it. But overall, I would have to put Canada in third. Australia and Europe, it's a little bit harder because obviously, if you're comparing Australia to like I don't know Norway or Switzerland or Germany, it would be easier to say Australia. But honestly, there are people who don't like it to be hot all the time, and that's what you find in northern Australia. But if you go to like Sydney, if you go to like Adelaide, maybe it could be like a better weather for you. Where I'm living right now is Melbourne, and it is a little bit cold in the winter, and the houses are not too well prepared for that. I even made a bit video about it, so it might be a little bit bothering. But yeah, I would either be with South Europe or Australia in this one. Barcelona was always nice when I was there. Rome was always nice when I was there. I wasn't there in like top hot heat summer, but other than that, all the other seasons I was in Rome at some point, and it was always lovely. It was always like sunny and all that. It did rain sometimes, but it was like poor rain, and then it stopped, and it was sunny again. And the weather was overall pretty nice. Let me see where else. Portugal was nice. I was there in like mid March, and it was still pretty nice weather. But of course, then if you're gonna compare it to like the UK, I'm sorry to say, it was a hard year the year I lived there. Very bad weather. Location wise, there's no comparison. Europeans all the way over. Like there's no comparison at all. And honestly, to have a 10 euro Ryanair flight to another country is just like an amazing feeling, honestly. Whereas like in Australia, you have to have a flight in the same country, like a couple hours flight just to get to another Australian capital or something. Same for Canada. So just like huge countries. And then on top of that, they're kind of far away. And I'll argue, like, I'm not sure if, I mean, Australia is known for being more isolated than Canada. It's true because Canada is right next to America. But if you're not American and you don't like America that much, I mean, Australia is closer to like New Zealand, it's closer to like Bali, Southeast Asia. So I'm not sure, obviously, Europe would be first, but I'm not sure I would put Australia third and Canada second. I would, depending on where you live in Canada, it's also kind of bad location wise. Like if you're in Vancouver, you have the whole Pacific Ocean to get to Asia, and then all of North America, and then the Atlantic Ocean to get to Europe. So you're pretty far as well. So yeah, I guess I would put Canada second, Australia third. But I could argue that Australia would be second and Canada would be third. I'm not sure. Next is culture, and hands down, Europe has to win. I mean, Melbourne is very good for culture as well, but just the amount of things that have to be done in Europe is insane. Like art and history and architecture, and there's so many more people in Europe also. Like Europe is big. Europe is dense. It's I think 3 times more dense than America, so it's definitely like 100 times more dense than Australia or Canada. So yeah, definitely Europe for culture. Uh, Maybe you could argue Canada and Australia for quality of life, for like having a more of a chill life, but for like just like a city life where you're kind of close to everything and you can walk and you can take the metro and just art exhibitions everywhere all the time, and you pass by like a gigantic fountain that was built in 1202 or something like that, or a church that was built by the Romans. Yeah, Europe is just incomparable for that. So best for nomads and for cost of living, Europe also wins hands down. It's definitely cheaper. I mean, even places like France, like Germany, which are on the more expensive end of Europe, are probably still cheaper than Canada and Australia. If you're in Switzerland, Switzerland is more expensive than both Canada and Australia. The UK is almost on par, maybe like a little bit cheaper, but I'm not sure. Ireland is pretty expensive as well, but overall, like Europe is definitely cheaper on average than, especially if you go east, like definitely much cheaper than Australia, much cheaper than Canada. And to have it as a nomad base, there's Albania, there's South Italy, which is a very good bang for your buck. There's Budapest, which is insane. I found a hostel in Budapest where you're paying 400 euros a month for bed, breakfast, and dinner. So yeah, definitely. If you are location independent, young, no family, working for like a tech company or something, Europe all the way between those countries. Okay, now education and student life. Australia and Canada have very good universities, but they're both paid for. And as an EU citizen now, like the fact that universities in Europe are free is like a very tempting thing. I mean, not all of them are free, but all of them are much less expensive, except for the UK. All of them are much less expensive than either Australia or Canada, and they still have like a pretty good quality of like recognition and all that. And then on top of that, like student life, since those countries are like more affordable and since they're closer to everything, you could realistically be a student in Italy and take a weekend off, like Amsterdam. I literally knew people who were doing that. Whereas you can't be a student in Canada and take the weekend. Like if you're gonna take a weekend off and you're living in like Montreal or Toronto, you're going to like what? You're not going anywhere. There's no time for that, you know. Whereas in Europe, you really could have an extended weekend where you go to a totally different country. You could live in the UK and be in Croatia for a weekend, or you could live in Italy and be in Copenhagen for a weekend or something like that. So that is truly amazing. It's good for student life, good for cost of living, good for nomads. It's honestly just not good for making money. That's the main problem with Europe. It's going to be hard for you to make a lot of money, but yeah, you get what you pay for.